The Zilani Confederation lived in a dream. For over 1,000 years, they had built their civilization around one simple idea: peace at any cost. Their worlds were like something out of a fairy tale. Rolling green hills covered in crops that fed billions. Crystal-clear rivers that flowed through cities made of white stone and glass. Parks where children played under purple skies, never knowing that danger could exist beyond their perfect bubble. Velterra had been council leader for 30 years, and in all that time, the biggest crisis she had faced was a trade dispute over grain exports. Her people were gentle farmers and scientists. They had turned 12 entire star systems into gardens. The most dangerous animal on any Zilani world was about the size of a house cat, and even those were kept as pets. The Zilani military, if you could even call it that, was more like a space coast guard. Their ships were beautiful things made of curved metal and glass, designed to look impressive at parades and trade ceremonies. They had weapons, sure, but they were mostly for show. The Zilani believed that if you were reasonable and polite, everyone else would be too. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The first sign of trouble came from their outer rim colonies. Ships had gone missing. Trade routes had gone silent. Then came the refugees, terrified Zilani fleeing in whatever ships they could find, telling impossible stories about monsters that killed for fun. The Kreth Dominion had found them. Nobody really knew where the Kreth came from originally. Some said they evolved on a world where everything ate everything else. Others claimed they were created in some ancient war as living weapons that had forgotten their original purpose. What everyone agreed on was that the Kreth loved violence the way most species loved art or music. They were huge reptilian creatures, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with scales that could stop most weapons and claws that could tear through steel. But what made them truly terrifying was not their size or strength, it was their minds. The Kreth had turned cruelty into a science. They studied pain the way the Zilani studied agriculture. When the Kreth invaded a world, they did not just conquer it. They made sure everyone suffered as much as possible for as long as possible. They used weapons designed to cause weeks of agony before death. They would capture civilians and broadcast their screams across entire systems as psychological warfare. The Kreth had been expanding for decades, swallowing up smaller civilizations. Most species in the galaxy knew about them but pretended they did not exist. As long as the monsters stayed in their corner of space, everyone else could sleep peacefully. But now the Kreth had decided the Zilani worlds looked tasty. Velterra stood in a command center beneath the capital city, watching her perfect world die on the screens around her. The Zilani Defense Fleet, 200 beautiful ships crewed by people who had never fired a shot in anger, lasted exactly 47 minutes against the Kreth war machine. The enemy did not even try to disable the Zilani ships cleanly. They tore them apart slowly, making sure the crews had time to suffer before the end. Velterra watched captains she had known personally scream for mercy that never came. Council leader, her aide whispered, all 4 of his arms shaking with terror. The outer defense ring has fallen. They estimate 6 hours before the first Kreth ships reach our atmosphere. Velterra closed her eyes. In 6 hours, her people would begin dying in ways she could not even imagine. The Kreth would not be quick about it. They would make it last for days, maybe weeks. Send the distress call, she said, her voice barely audible. Every frequency we have. Offer them everything, our agricultural databases, our terraforming technology, our entire scientific library. Whatever it takes to get someone, anyone, to help us. The message went out across the galaxy like a scream in the dark. The Zilani were offering the knowledge that had taken them centuries to develop, secrets that could turn dead worlds into paradise, to anyone willing to stand between them and the monsters. Most civilizations ignored it completely. War was messy and expensive, and getting involved with the Kreth was basically suicide. A few sent polite messages saying they were very sorry but could not spare any military forces at the moment. Everyone had an excuse. The message reached Earth at 0347 hours, Eastern Standard Time. The duty officer almost filed it with the rest of the routine communications, but something about the desperation in the transmission made him wake up his commanding officer. Admiral Jack Morrison was not sleeping well anyway. The 62-year-old veteran had too many ghosts for peaceful dreams. He had fought in 3 different wars on Earth before humanity reached the stars, and he had learned that evil existed in the universe. Real evil, the kind that enjoyed causing pain. Morrison read the Zilani message 3 times, then studied the tactical data they had included. The Kreth force was massive, over 600 warships, more than anything humanity had ever faced. But something about their attack patterns bothered him. They were too neat, too organized. The Kreth fought like they were following rules, like war was some kind of game with agreed-upon limits. Morrison had spent 40 years learning that war had only one rule: win or die. Lisa, he called to his aid. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park was one of the few officers who understood Morrison's way of thinking. She had grown up on the rough colonies where you learned to fight dirty or you did not grow up at all. "What do you think?" Morrison asked, showing her the data. Park studied it for a moment. "Sir, they fight like bullies. They pick on people weaker than them, but I bet they have never faced anyone who hits back harder." Morrison nodded. "Get me Admiral Davis on the line. And start sending prep orders to the fleet. All of it." "Sir, you are talking about every human warship we have." "That's right. Time to show the galaxy what humans do to bullies." The emergency meeting in Geneva lasted all night. Admiral Rebecca Davis sat at the head of the long table, looking at faces she had known for decades. These were the people who made the hard decisions for humanity, and right now they were arguing about whether to risk everything for strangers on the other side of the galaxy. Davis was 71 years old, with silver hair and scars on her hands from her early days as a ship engineer. She had commanded fleets in 3 major conflicts, including the AI wars that nearly destroyed human civilization 15 years ago. If anyone understood the cost of warfare, it was her. "We cannot just ignore this," said General Patricia Collins, her voice sharp with frustration. "These Zilani people are facing complete extermination." Secretary Martinez shook his head. "Patricia, think about what you are suggesting. We would be committing our entire military to a war on the other side of known space, for people we have never met, against an enemy we know nothing about." "We know plenty about the Kreth," interrupted Commander Mike Torres. The younger officer had files spread across the table in front of him. "I have been studying them since the distress call came in. They are not just conquerors, they are sadists." Torres pulled up a holographic display showing Kreth battle footage. The images were disturbing. Civilian ships being slowly torn apart while the crews were still alive. Planetary bombardments that left people dying slowly over weeks instead of ending things quickly. "Look at this," Torres said, pointing to tactical readouts. "They have weapons that could destroy cities instantly, but instead they use biological agents designed to cause maximum pain. They keep populations alive just long enough to use up all medical supplies and create chaos." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed what they were seeing. These were not the actions of a military trying to win territory. This was torture on a planetary scale. "The galaxy already fears us," Secretary Martinez said quietly. "Humans come from what they call a death world. They think we are barely controlled savages. If we deploy our full military might like this, it will confirm their worst fears about us." Admiral Davis had been quiet through most of the debate, but now she leaned forward. "Maybe that is not such a bad thing." The room turned to look at her. "For 30 years, Davis continued, we have been trying to prove that humans are civilized. We have been polite in our diplomacy, careful in our military actions, and restrained in our responses to provocation. And what has it gotten us?" She gestured to the data about the Kreth attacks. "Right now, an entire civilization is being tortured to death, and nobody in this galaxy is lifting a finger to help them. Not because they cannot, but because they will not. Because getting involved is inconvenient." Commander Torres nodded. Ma'am, we have the largest military in known space. We built it because we learned the hard way that sometimes violence is the only language bullies understand. The Kreth are the biggest bullies this galaxy has ever seen. There is another factor to consider, added Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the Intelligence Division. The Zalani agricultural technology they are offering in exchange for help. Our analysis suggests it could solve food shortage problems across dozens of human colonies. General Collins looked around the table. So we have people who need our help, technology that could benefit millions of humans, and an enemy that deserves everything we can throw at them. What exactly are we debating here? Secretary Martinez sighed. The political fallout. Other species will say we are proving their point about human aggression. Let them, Davis said firmly. Better to be feared and have allies who are alive than to be liked and watch innocent people die because we were too worried about our image. She stood up, her command presence filling the room. I have seen what happens when good people do nothing while evil spreads. I fought AI machines that viewed organic life as a problem to be solved efficiently. I watched colonies burn because we hesitated to use the force necessary to stop it. Davis looked each person at the table in the eye. The Kreth think they can torture entire civilizations because nobody has ever made them pay the full price for their actions. Today, that changes. The vote was called. One by one, hands went up around the table. Even Secretary Martinez eventually raised his hand, though he shook his head as he did it. Motion passes, Davis announced. We deploy the 1st through 5th fleets. Everything we have. The room exploded into activity as staff officers began making calls and sending coded messages. Admiral Morrison, who had been attending via hologram from his command ship, nodded approvingly. Rebecca, he said, this is going to be the largest human military operation in our history. Are you sure about this? Davis smiled, and for the first time in years, it was not a diplomatic smile. It was the smile of a predator. Jack, these Kreth picked the wrong species to mess with. They have been bullying farmers and diplomats. Now they get to meet some Deathworlders. Within 12 hours, mobilization orders went out across human space. Fleets that had been scattered across dozens of systems began converging on rally points. Soldiers who had been on leave were recalled to duty. Weapons that had been in storage were loaded onto ships. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every human who had ever served wanted to be part of this mission. Veterans came out of retirement. Reserve units volunteered for active duty. Even civilian ships offered to carry supplies. By the end of the second day, the largest armada in human history was moving towards Zalani space. 317 warships, from massive dreadnoughts to fast attack cruisers. At the head of the formation flew Admiral Morrison's flagship, the Relentless, her hull scarred from a dozen battles but her weapons systems running perfectly. Behind her came ships with names that would be remembered for generations. The Indomitable, whose crew had never lost a battle. The Defiant, built from the wreckage of the first ship to successfully fight an AI dreadnought. The Retribution, whose captain had volunteered specifically because his homeworld had been attacked by raiders similar to the Kreth. As the fleet entered hyperspace, Morrison sat in his command chair reviewing intelligence reports. The Kreth had no idea what was coming for them. They were used to fighting species that viewed war as a last resort, who tried to minimize casualties and avoid collateral damage. They were about to learn that humans viewed war very differently. Where other species saw rules and limitations, humans saw problems to be solved by any means necessary. The Zalani had called for help from anyone willing to fight monsters. They were about to discover that sometimes, the only way to stop a monster is to send a bigger monster. And humanity had spent thousands of years becoming very, very good at being monsters. The space around Redania Prime had been quiet for hours. The Kreth fleet sat in perfect formation, like vultures waiting to feast. Their massive ships blocked out the stars, dark metal shapes bristling with weapons designed to cause maximum pain rather than quick destruction. They were in no hurry. The Zalani had nowhere to run, and the Kreth enjoyed taking their time. Then the fabric of space itself seemed to tear open. The first human ship emerged from hyperspace like a bullet fired from the darkness. Then another. Then 10. Then 50. Within seconds, over 300 human warships materialized at the edge of the system, their engines glowing like angry stars against the black of space. On the Zalani command ship, hidden behind the fourth moon of Verdania Prime, Council leader Velterra watched her tactical screens with growing amazement and terror. The human ships were nothing like the elegant vessels her people built, or even the brutish Kreth warships. These looked like they had been designed by someone who understood that space was trying to kill you every second, and had built their ships to kill it back. Human warships were all angles and armor plating. They bristled with weapon systems that served no purpose other than destruction. Where Zalani ships had viewing ports and decorative elements, human ships had additional gun turrets. Where other species put artwork or cultural symbols, humans mounted missile launchers. How many ships did you count? Velterra asked her aide, though she was afraid to hear the answer. 312 confirmed contacts, came the reply, her aide's mandibles clicking rapidly in a way that meant he was terrified. All showing full military configuration. Ma'am, I have never seen anything like this. Each of those ships carries more firepower than our entire defense fleet. The communication system crackled to life, and a human voice filled the bridge. It was calm, professional, and absolutely cold. This is Admiral Jack Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. We received your distress call. Transmit all tactical data on enemy positions and strength immediately. We will take it from here. Velterra had been preparing for this moment, hoping against hope that someone would answer their call for help. But now that it had happened, she realized how unprepared she was for what humanity had sent. She had expected maybe a small fleet, some ships to escort her people to safety while they negotiated with the Kreth. She had not expected an armada. With trembling hands, she activated the communication system. Admiral Morrison, we cannot express our gratitude for your response to our plea. However, we had hoped for perhaps a defensive escort, some protective measures while we attempt to negotiate a peaceful resolution with the Kreth forces. Ma'am. Morrison's voice cut through her words like a laser through tissue paper. We did not travel halfway across the galaxy to negotiate with terrorists who torture civilians for fun. We came here to solve your problem. Permanently. The silence that followed was deafening. Velterra looked around her bridge at her officers, seeing her own shock reflected in their faces. The humans were not here to help them run away or hide. They were here to fight. On the human flagship Relentless, Lieutenant Emily Watson sat at her communications station, monitoring the chatter between enemy ships. The Kreth had noticed the human arrival, but their responses were almost laughably dismissive. Admiral, she reported, trying to keep the amusement out of her voice. The Kreth are referring to us as another herbivore species seeking protection. They are not even changing their battle formations. One of their commanders just said, and I quote, "These new weaklings will flee like all the others once we demonstrate our superiority." Admiral Morrison leaned back in his command chair and smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Watson had served under Morrison for 3 years, and she had learned to recognize that expression. She had seen it during the siege of New Geneva, when pirates had made the mistake of attacking a human colony. The pirates had not lived long enough to regret their decision. Perfect, Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly across the bridge. Signal all ships. Weapons free in 60 seconds. I want targeting solutions on their command vessels first. Sir, asked Captain Rodriguez from the tactical station, should we attempt to contact them first? Offer terms. Morrison turned to look at him, and Rodriguez actually took a step back from the intensity in the Admiral's eyes. Captain, did you review the intelligence reports on Kreth tactics? Yes, sir. Did you see what they did to the civilian populations on Kepler 7? How they used biological weapons designed to keep people alive and suffering for weeks? Rodriguez's face hardened. Yes, sir. Then you understand why we are not here to offer terms. We are here to teach the galaxy a lesson about what happens when you torture innocents. Morrison's voice carried to every corner of the bridge. These Kreth have spent decades believing they were the most dangerous predators in space. They are about to learn what it means to hunt something that hunts back. The human fleet began to move, spreading out into attack formations that no other species in the galaxy would recognize. Where most civilizations fought in neat lines with predetermined engagement ranges, the humans scattered like a pack of wolves surrounding prey. On the Kreth flagship, Admiral Thakmore watched the human ships with growing confusion. "What are they doing?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "This formation makes no sense. They are exposing their flanks, leaving gaps in their lines." "Perhaps they are inexperienced, my lord," suggested his aide. "These Deathworlders may be fierce individually, but they likely know nothing of proper space combat." Thakmore nodded. The Kreth had fought dozens of species over the centuries, and they all followed the same basic patterns. Formal challenges, predetermined battle zones, agreed-upon rules of engagement. Even when species fought desperately, they fought predictably. He was about to learn that humans did not fight like anyone else. Back on the Zalani command ship, Velterra watched in growing horror as she realized what was about to happen. "Admiral Morrison," she transmitted urgently, "surely there must be some way to resolve this without bloodshed. The Kreth are a proud species, but perhaps if we offered them sufficient tribute." "Ma'am," Morrison's reply was patient but firm, "I need you to understand something. We humans come from a world where everything is trying to kill us. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the bacteria. We did not become the dominant species on our planet by offering tribute to things that wanted to eat us." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was like iron. "The Kreth chose to make themselves humanity's problem when they decided to torture innocent people. We do not negotiate with monsters. We eliminate them." The countdown reached 0, and Admiral Morrison gave the order that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. "All ships, engage at will. Show them what humans do to bullies." 300 human warships opened fire simultaneously, and the Kreth learned that they were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. The first salvo from the human fleet lit up space like a deadly fireworks display. 300 ships opened fire at once, their weapons creating streams of light that crossed the darkness between fleets in seconds. The Kreth had barely begun to react when the first impacts hit their shields. What happened next shocked everyone watching, including the humans themselves. The Kreth shields, designed to withstand the polite energy weapons used by most galactic civilizations, simply collapsed under the brutal assault of human kinetic weapons and high-yield explosives. Captain Tom Bradley stood on the bridge of his destroyer, the Mongoose, watching his tactical display with grim satisfaction. He commanded a wolf pack of 6 ships, all of them built for one purpose, hunting larger prey in coordinated attacks. "Listen up," he told his squadron over the comm, "these lizards think they know how space combat works. They expect us to line up politely and trade shots until someone gets bored. We are going to show them how wrong they are." The Kreth battle group they were targeting consisted of 12 heavy cruisers arranged in the traditional formation, a neat line with their strongest ship in the center. It was exactly what Bradley had hoped to see. "All ships, implement attack pattern Delta," he ordered. "Hit them from 6 different directions at once. Target their engines first, I want them dead in space before they figure out what is happening." The human ships scattered like leaves in a hurricane, each one approaching the enemy formation from a different angle. The Kreth commander tried to adjust his ships to meet the threat, but there were too many directions to cover. The Mongoose and her sister ship struck like wolves bringing down a buffalo. They concentrated all their firepower on the engines and weapon systems of individual Kreth ships, crippling them one by one rather than trying to destroy them outright. "Sir," Bradley's tactical officer called out, "the Kreth flagship is signaling surrender. Their shields are down to 15%. Bradley looked at the tactical display, seeing the damage his squadron had inflicted. The proud Kreth battle group was now a collection of drifting hulks, their crews trapped in ships that could barely maintain life support. "Put them through," he said. The holographic image of a massive reptilian creature appeared on his bridge. Admiral Thakmor of the Kreth Third Fleet looked like he had been in a fight, his scales were cracked, and one of his eyes was swollen shut. "Human Commander," Thakmor said, his voice carrying the arrogance that had made the Kreth so hated across the galaxy. "We acknowledge your superior tactics. We are prepared to discuss terms for our withdrawal from this system." Bradley stared at the Kreth Admiral for a long moment. Around him, his bridge crew waited to see how their captain would respond. They all knew what the intelligence reports had said about Kreth tactics, about the biological weapons and the deliberate torture of civilians. "You should have thought about terms before you started using bioweapons on innocent people," Bradley said quietly. "This is not a negotiation. This is an extermination." The transmission cut off, and Bradley turned to his weapons officer. "Finish them." While the fleet battle raged in space, another kind of combat was happening inside the ships themselves. Commander Ashley Reed led a boarding party of 30 Marines onto the Kreth command ship, their target the biological weapons storage that intelligence had identified in the ship's lower decks. Reed's Marines were encased in powered armor that made each soldier look like a walking tank. The suits were 8 feet tall, covered in reactive armor plating, and equipped with weapons that could punch through starship bulkheads. They moved through the Kreth ship like unstoppable machines. "Ma'am," Sergeant Ryan Clark reported over the comm, "we have reached the bioweapons lab. Enemy crew is abandoning their posts and trying to surrender." Reed looked through the transparent aluminum window into the laboratory beyond. Inside, she could see canisters filled with the engineered plagues the Kreth used to torture entire populations. The thought of what those weapons had done to innocent civilians filled her with cold rage. "Negative," she replied, her voice carrying clearly to every Marine in the boarding party. "No prisoners from ships carrying biological weapons. This is a sterilization operation. Eliminate all enemy personnel and destroy everything in this section." The Marines moved through the ship with mechanical efficiency, their training taking over completely. They had studied the intelligence reports. They knew what the Kreth did to civilians. There would be no mercy today. The battle raged for 4 hours, but it was never really a contest. The Kreth had built their reputation fighting species that viewed war as a regrettable necessity, something to be conducted with rules and limitations. The humans viewed war as a problem to be solved as quickly and efficiently as possible. Human ships used tactics that horrified the watching galaxy. They coordinated ramming attacks, deliberately targeting command structures to cause maximum chaos. They boarded enemy vessels not to capture them, but to make sure nothing survived. The Zalani, watching from their hiding places throughout the system, witnessed something that would haunt their dreams for years to come. When the human cruiser Defiance took critical damage from a Kreth dreadnought, her captain made a decision that shocked everyone. "This is Captain Mark Hughes of the Defiance," his voice carried clearly over the fleet communications. "We have taken critical damage to our reactor core. Estimate 6 minutes until containment failure." Admiral Morrison's voice came back immediately. "Mark, get your people to the escape pods. We will pick you up." Hughes looked around his bridge, seeing his crew working frantically to keep the ship operational just a little longer. Through the main viewer, he could see the Kreth dreadnought that had damaged his ship, its weapons charging for another salvo that would finish off nearby human vessels. "Negative, Admiral," Hughes replied calmly. "We still have maneuvering thrusters and 6 minutes of reactor power. That is enough." Everyone on the fleet communication channel fell silent as they realized what Hughes was planning. "All hands, this is the captain," Hughes announced to his crew. "Anyone who wants to leave has 30 seconds to get to an escape pod. Anyone who stays, it has been an honor serving with you." Most of the crew ran for the escape pods, but 15 officers and crew members remained at their posts. They knew someone had to keep the ship operational for what came next. Hughes turned his ship toward the Kreth dreadnought and engaged full thrusters. The Defiance, already dying from reactor damage, accelerated toward the enemy ship like a guided missile. "Tell my wife the galaxy is a little safer today," Hughes said into his communicator, and then the Defiance struck the Kreth dreadnought at full speed. Both ships vanished in a ball of fire that could be seen from 3 star systems away. When the battle finally ended, not a single Kreth ship remained operational. Some had been destroyed outright. Others had been boarded and systematically gutted by human marines. A few had tried to surrender, but the humans had made it clear that surrender was not an option for ships carrying biological weapons. The Zalani, emerging from hiding as the last fires died out in space, found themselves looking at a human fleet that had lost 37 ships and over 8,000 crew members, but had completely annihilated an enemy that had seemed unstoppable just hours before. For the first time in galactic history, an entire military force had not just been defeated, but wiped from existence with cold, methodical efficiency. The age of Kreth terror was over. The age of human protection had begun. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In less than 4 hours, the humans had completely destroyed the most feared military force in known space. The Kreth Dominion, which had terrorized dozens of civilizations for over 2 centuries, had been wiped out so thoroughly that their survivors were begging for mercy. But the humans were not finished. Admiral Davis stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Retribution, watching the tactical displays that showed human fleets moving throughout former Kreth territory. What had started as a rescue mission for the Zalani had become something much larger, a systematic hunt to eliminate every Kreth military installation in the galaxy. "Status report," she commanded. Commander Jennifer Hayes consulted her data pad. 7th Fleet has secured the Kreth shipyards at Corvin Prime. 9th Fleet is mopping up the last military base in the Outer Rim. Estimated completion of operations in 72 hours. Davis nodded. The Kreth had built their empire on fear and brutality, but they had made one fatal mistake: they had scattered their forces across too many systems, believing their reputation would protect them. Now that reputation was working against them, as human forces tracked down every military installation with methodical precision. "Admiral," Hayes continued, "we are receiving surrender offers from civilian populations on 12 different Kreth worlds. They are offering complete submission and reparations for war crimes." "Accept the surrenders," Davis replied without hesitation. "But maintain orbital monitoring stations above every Kreth world. Any attempt to rebuild military capabilities, any sign of weapons manufacturing, and we turn their planet into glass." The efficiency of the human campaign shocked even their own allies. In 3 weeks, humanity had accomplished what the combined forces of the galaxy had been unable to do in 2 centuries. They had ended the Kreth threat permanently. The Zalani, who had started all of this with their desperate plea for help, watched the human war machine with growing unease. They had asked for protection, but what they had received was something far more comprehensive and terrifying. Council leader Velterra requested a diplomatic conference with human leadership. She hoped to discuss the eventual withdrawal of human forces from Zalani space, now that the immediate threat had been eliminated. The meeting did not go as she had planned. "Admiral Davis," Velterra began carefully, her 4 arms folded in a gesture of respect, "the Zalani people cannot adequately express our gratitude for your intervention. The Kreth threat has been eliminated beyond our wildest hopes." Davis nodded politely from her holographic projection. "You are welcome. The Kreth needed to be stopped." "Yes, absolutely," Velterra agreed quickly. "However, now that the crisis has passed, the Galactic Council has raised some concerns about the continued presence of such a large human military force in this region of space. Perhaps it would be appropriate for your fleets to return to human territory." The silence that followed seemed to last forever. When Davis finally spoke, her voice was quiet but carried an undertone that made Velterra's skin crawl. "No." The single word hit the diplomatic conference like a physical blow. Velterra's translator system struggled to process not just the meaning, but the absolute finality in the human admiral's tone. "I beg your pardon?" Velterra asked, hoping she had misunderstood. Admiral Susan Carter, who had just been appointed as commander of the human occupation forces, leaned forward in her chair. Carter was younger than Davis, but her reputation was already legendary among human military circles. She had led the boarding actions that captured 3 Kreth biological weapons facilities. Council leader, Carter said with the patience of someone explaining something to a child, "You called for help because your people could not protect themselves. We solved your problem. Permanently. Now you are safe, and you are going to stay that way." Velterra felt panic rising in her chest. But surely there is no longer a need for such an extensive military presence. The Kreth are gone. Peace has returned to this region. Carter's expression hardened. "Ma'am, you have been living in a fantasy. For thousands of years, your people have been playing in a sandbox, pretending the galaxy is a safe place where everyone follows rules and respects boundaries. We have seen what is really out there in the dark between the stars." She gestured to data screens showing intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The Kreth were not unique. They were just the most successful of dozens of predator species that view civilizations like yours as prey. Right now, there are at least 6 other aggressive militaristic empires watching what happened here, trying to decide whether to challenge us or find easier targets. Admiral Davis rejoined the conversation. The galaxy has been peaceful for so long because species like the Kreth have been keeping everyone else terrified. Now that we have eliminated the Kreth, other predators are going to test the waters. When they do, you are going to be very grateful that the Deathworlders are your neighbors. Velterra tried one more diplomatic approach. "Perhaps we could arrange for some kind of mutual defense treaty, something less permanent than occupation forces." Carter laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Council leader, your entire military was destroyed in 47 minutes. A mutual defense treaty implies that both sides bring something to the table. What exactly would the Zilani contribute to their own defense?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Velterra realized with growing horror that the humans were not just refusing to leave, they were telling her people that they were no longer capable of governing themselves. "This is not right," she protested weakly. "The Galactic Council will never accept human hegemony over this region of space." Admiral Davis leaned back in her chair, and for the first time in the conversation, she smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. "The Galactic Council had 2 centuries to deal with the Kreth," she said quietly. "They chose to ignore the problem and hope it would go away. We fixed their problem for them in 3 weeks. She paused, letting that sink in. "If the Galactic Council wants to complain about our methods, they are welcome to try. But they should remember that we are the species that just eliminated the most feared military force in the galaxy. If they think they can intimidate us with strongly worded diplomatic protests, they are welcome to find out how wrong they are." The transmission ended, leaving Velterra staring at a blank screen. Around her, her advisors sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just heard. The humans were not leaving. More than that, they were making it clear that they considered this region of space to be under their protection now, whether the inhabitants liked it or not. Across the galaxy, the news of the human decision sent shockwaves through every government and military organization. Species that had never built weapons stronger than police equipment began frantically researching military technology. Civilizations that had relied on diplomacy and trade agreements started constructing defense fleets. The humans had proven that in a universe where monsters were real, sometimes the only way to stay safe was to have bigger monsters on your side. But what happened when the monsters decided they knew what was best for you? The age of galactic peace was over. The age of human protection had begun, and the galaxy was discovering that protection and freedom were not the same thing. Whether they liked it or not, the humans were now the apex predators of known space, and they had made it clear that they intended to keep their new position. The Deathworlders had come to stay.